Good morning. Good morning. Have any of you heard of Alex Hale? Alex Hale was the author and the creator of Roots. Have you heard of Roots?
Oh, yeah.
I would think, yes. We're all familiar with that one. Right, well, Alex Hale had a picture in his office. And it was a picture of a tortoise on top of a fence. And one day a person came in and they asked him, they said, Alex, why do you have a picture of a tortoise on a fence in your office? And he said, oh, well, that helps remind me of a lesson that I learned a long time ago. And that is that if you ever see a tortoise on a fence, he had help getting up there. He did not get up there by himself. Someone put him up there. He said, so whenever things are going really well in my life, and things are going great, and I'm saying, wow, this is marvelous, look how great of the things that I have done, and look at all these wonderful things that I have accomplished, I can look over at that picture and be reminded, I'm the tortoise, and I had help getting here. Right? It was a way that he helped himself to stay humble, to keep that pride from sneaking in and taking over. And that's something that Jesus talks about today in our gospel reading for today. In the Gospel of Luke, it says that Jesus was talking with people who thought that their works were going to be enough for their own righteousness, and that they even had contempt on other people because they didn't see them as being as good as they are. And so Jesus tells them this story. He says there are two men who went into the temple to pray, and one was a Pharisee, the other was a tax collector. And the Pharisee walks into the middle of the temple, and he stands there, says, God, thank you. Thank you that I am not like all of these other people. Thank you that I'm not like the sinners, I'm not like the adulterers and the unjust, and like this pathetic little tax collector over here. After all, I pay my tithes on everything that I get. You know, I fast twice a week. He was very proud of himself. He looked at the things that he was doing and he said, I am doing a very good job. And he was seeing himself as his own source of righteousness. And so much so that he looked at other people and said, well, they're not doing as well as I am. I am better than they are. And I think that's something that sometimes we see in the church today. We see this attitude sometimes that we've got it all together, and those people out there, they're the sinners. Or maybe even the person sitting next to you. Yeah, that guy, he doesn't do it as well as I do. And we can even breed contempt for others. Yeah, I see some married couples looking at each other. You know, but we can breed contempt even. But sometimes it's even a little more subtle than that. Sometimes I think, especially in the Lutheran Church, we emphasize grace a lot, and we emphasize the work of God. And so I think a lot of times we get that we need God's mercy. We get that we're still sinners, but maybe we see it as kind of we're getting better at this. And maybe we don't need as much. I was at a meeting this week. This was a circuit meeting, right, which was a bunch of pastors from some of the churches around got together, and we had a worship service and a Bible study and just talked about some things. And one of the passages that we were looking at in this Bible study was this passage also from Luke, where Jesus was going to Jerusalem. And on his way, he looks over and he sees these lepers. There were 10 lepers, and they cry out to him. They cry out to him. They say, Lord, have mercy. And they were hoping that he would help. They obviously had heard of Jesus. They had heard of the things that he could do, that he could heal people. May have heard that he could forgive sins. And they cried out, Lord, have mercy. And this was a very natural thing for them to do, because in this culture, they generally saw sickness and accidents and things like this as punishment for sin. And we see this at other points in the gospel where people ask when something happens and they say, Jesus, what sin caused this? There was a tower that fell. They said, well, what sin did they do that caused them to get crushed by a tower? And there was another time where Jesus comes across a blind man. And the disciples say, well, Jesus, was it this man or was it his parents who sinned? Right? They didn't ask, was it sin that caused this? That was just assumed. It was who was the one who's guilty for this one. Now, as a little side note, Jesus makes it clear that's not why these things happen. That this isn't a punishment for sin. In fact, with the blind man, he said, actually, this man was blind so that the glory of God could be shown right here, right now. And he healed him. Right? But so you have these lepers, these men with leprosy, who were crying out, Lord, have mercy. See, we want to be healed. We want to be relieved of this punishment that we are enduring for our sin. Because that's how they saw it. And so they went and sought the one who had the authority, who they had seen healing others, relieving that punishment. They're crying out for mercy. And that's what mercy is, right? Mercy is when you deserve a certain punishment and someone removes that punishment. Right? They don't make you suffer that full punishment. And they were asking Christ to remove that punishment. They were crying out for mercy because they had nothing else to hold on to. And that is the attitude that Christ is telling us that we need to adopt. Right? Because he goes on, when he's telling this parable with the two prayers, you have the Pharisee who was all proud of himself, but he says, but then the tax collector, he stood a far way off. He stood way off. He wouldn't even go near the other folks. And he wouldn't even look to heaven because he was unworthy. He couldn't look up. And it says he beat his chest and he said, Lord, please have mercy on me. He recognized his sin. He knew that he had done wrong. He knew that he was guilty. And that the only hope that he had was that the one who has the authority, that God would give him mercy. He didn't look to his own works. He didn't look to anything of himself. He just said, God, I need help. I can't take the punishment. It reminds me of Cain in our Old Testament reading when we were reading through that Cain, he killed his brother. He was guilty. And God calls him out and he says, Cain, what did you do? Your brother's blood is crying out to me from the ground. And what he punishes him. Right? He says, you're going to be a wanderer. You're going to be a fugitive. You're being sent out from me. And Cain says, God, I can't take that. I can't bear that. I can't bear that punishment. It's too much for me. He doesn't say, God, you're being unfair. God, you're being unreasonable. Or I'm innocent here. He doesn't try to defend himself. He simply says, I can't take it. I can't bear this punishment. And that's where we are. When we come before God, when we have the sin that we have brought, there's nothing that we can look to of ourselves to say, God, look, you should ease this punishment. Look at all these things I've done. No. All we do is come before God and say, God, have mercy on me. Have mercy on me. I know I deserve it, but please have mercy on me. And the great thing is that God is a God who loves to show mercy. He loves to show mercy. He showed mercy to Cain, right? He said, I'm going to mark you so that nobody will touch you. Right? And he protects him. And he showed mercy to the tax collector, right? He says, who left justified was the tax collector. Right? And he shows mercy to us. And he demonstrates his love to show mercy through Jesus Christ. As Jesus came and he took our sins, right? And he died on the cross. He took the punishment that we deserved. He took that punishment that we deserve so that then God would show mercy on us and say, you don't have to suffer that punishment. You are now forgiven of that. And God gives us mercy. He gives us not only mercy in the way that we might ask, because dare we have the courage, if we were to stand before God, maybe we would say, God, could you please lessen the punishment for me? I know I deserve it, but could you please lessen it? But he doesn't just lessen it. He removes it completely through Christ. And he doesn't just remove the punishment, but he makes us his own. He makes us his children, right? He puts on us the crown of life, and he welcomes us into his kingdom for eternity. That is the nature of God's mercy. It is so great. It is so amazing, so much beyond what we could ask for. I mean, it blows your mind. He is a God who loves to show mercy, but he says, come to me. Come to me and humble yourself. Let's deal with reality here. There's sin. There's sin and there's guilt. And outside of Christ, we can't stand. You know, one of the things that we talked about in that circuit meeting was how sometimes in our lives we can feel like we're starting to get it all right. We're starting to, I'm going to church regularly, I'm praying, I'm in the Bible, I'm doing all these things, and we can feel like, I don't need quite as much mercy anymore. Maybe I'm down here. I just need a little bit of mercy right now, God. But what God is saying is, no, we always need this much mercy. Right? Outside of Christ, we have no hope. But with Christ, with the mercy that he gives, then we are freed. We are freed of that punishment. That we know that if we humble ourselves before God, if we confess our sins, that we, like the tax collector, go home justified and forgiven by a God who loves to show us mercy. Amen.